welcome to Books on the Go. I'm Anna and I'm coming to you on a long weekend, so I thought I'd just do a quick update with my weekend reads and what I've been reading and what's coming up. So I'm in the beach house and I've got some very miscellaneous books. I tend to leave books down here sometimes that I haven't got to, and I think, well, when I go back down I'll read them. And so in theory I should, when I come down here, I don't actually need to bring any books with me, but I did bring the 4 for the 3 days. But one of them I have finished, I was sort of partway through, and that's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. So this is one that we're doing on the podcast, and I read, it's by Yuval Noah Harari, and I read his first book, Sapiens, a couple of years ago, and he's written another one, Homo Deus, in between, which I hadn't got to. But this one appealed to me because it sounded like he's going to just sort of tell you how to live, or how humankind should live in the 21st century, and here are the lessons that we need to learn. It doesn't quite, I couldn't say that it does that, it's not a how-to, but he's a world historian. I think he's based at Cambridge now, Oxford. No, he has a PhD from the University of Oxford, but he now lectures at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in world history. So he takes a very big picture view, and that can be quite comforting because he can look at modern day problems and say things like fake news. He'll say, well, we've always lived with stories, we've always built fictions to understand the world. So even if you look at religions, they're all based on a fiction, or there's always a story that people connect with, and so it's not that much of a new thing. So because he takes such a long range view, it can be quite soothing to put things in perspective. And he's very intelligent and very good at taking something that's a conventional wisdom and questioning it. And this book, he goes through the problems that we face today. So some of the main ones are climate change and the effect of technology and the fact that humans might lose their jobs. And at the same time, we don't yet have the sort of liberal democracy mindset or ideology that has been dominating the world is in crisis. So we don't yet have a new story to tell or a new framework to deal with these big structural changes that are happening to us as a global community. And he then proceeds through other elements that are at play, like war and religion and fake news and so on. But it's been written in conjunction with his readers. I think he's answering questions that readers have posed him. And so while a lot of the elements are quite topical, it felt at times a bit like a hodgepodge of things. And because he's so big picture, it's by necessity quite a superficial look at all of those things, because you can't, any one of those issues can be a book in itself. And the other thing that he does is he'll pose the questions, he doesn't necessarily have the solutions, and he doesn't really give you an opinion. He's more the objective, I don't know if objective is the right word, but he's more the, presenting these issues and putting them up for discussion and being very careful to point out where they sit in the scheme of world history. But sometimes I just wanted him to say, what do you think? What do you think about it? And he doesn't do that. You can infer some of his, beliefs and values, but he's quite careful not to do that. But on the whole, I would recommend it because of all the, you can see how many flags I've got and tags, because there are so many things that where you have to stop and think about it, and I need to go and make some notes for the podcast. But I'd much rather that he is here and writing this and thinking about these things than not. I think we're lucky to have him. So it's definitely one to look out for. So that's 21 lessons for the 21st century. And then quite a change of pace for my next one. And I was so excited that this came in, because this has been on my radar, and I think I had to get it in London. This is Vernon Subutex 1 by Virginie Despentes. And it's translated by, I want to say Frank Wynne. Frank Wynne. I don't know, I think I saw this on Litsy, and I mean, the cover for a start is just glorious, and it's been shortlisted, or was shortlisted, for the Man Booker International Prize, which I think was won by Flights, by Olga Chochek, whose name I can't pronounce, but it just sounded really fun, and so far it has been. It's who is Vernon Subutex, an urban legend. So he ran a record store in Paris. He's fallen on hard times. He can't pay his rent. So ultimately he's now been evicted from his flat. And so he's this sort of man about town muso who had a lot of street cred in his day, but who now actually needs to beg, find somewhere to live. And get back on his feet. So I'm at the early stages, and we'll see how it plays out. But it's got a very realist, sort of gritty, almost crass style of writing. It's a warts and all. You get into the minds of various characters, and often they're men who are, treat women terribly. And in that way, it reminds me a bit of The End by Fernanda Torres, which we did on the podcast a couple of months ago. And that was set in Rio de Janeiro. I think she's Brazilian. And again, it was getting into the minds of these sort of old men who are now older, but who were real players in their time, and sort of politically incorrect and all of that, but from a woman's perspective. So she's not necessarily endorsing their views, but just really understands how these men tick. And so it's a very easy style to read, quite lively. There are lots of things that ring true that he says, and they're really touching things. He's actually been quite lonely, and he only became aware of this fragmentation much later, when loneliness had walled him up alive. Then came the chain of catastrophes. So some of his friends had died, and it just started to occur to him that people who he'd shared really special memories with and really fun times, defining moments in his life, were not around anymore. So it's interesting. I'm about 100 pages into this one, but it's a good, breezy, fun read so far. So that's Vernon Subutex 1, and I think there's a second one. I'd recommend it so far. Then coming up for the podcast, we're doing another non-fiction. We've done a lot of fiction. We did a lot of the Man Booker long list, actually, but this is Billion Dollar Whale, which I saw reviewed in the Financial Times and looks really, really fun. It's the true story of Joe Low, who was a Malaysian financier, but a fraudster. So he, I don't really know because I haven't read it yet, but he was bad. And he financed, I think, The Wolf of Wall Street. So he was in the Hollywood world, and somehow bamboozled a lot of high-flying people. And then I think he's been arrested. Is he in jail? I don't know where he is now. I'll find out. But it just sounds that sort of larger-than-life story of someone who is able to persuade people that he's something that he's not, and I find that quite fascinating, and it's all true. So it sounds a little bit Wolf of Wall Street-esque, but it's not written by him. It's Tom Wright and Bradley Hope, who I believe are journalists, Wall Street Journal correspondents, and they were finalists for the Pulitzer Prize and winners of a Loeb Award for their coverage of the story. So this should be really good. And I've dipped into the first few pages. It's very lively and engaging. So that will be a fun read, Billion Dollar Whale. And then this is Trick by Domenico Starnone, and he wrote Ties, which was the story of a marriage breakdown. And it was interesting because I read that last year, and it was quite short, like this, a sort of a short novel, but beautifully written, very dense, and set in partly in an apartment, and quite claustrophobic, very realistic about this marriage breakdown. And I thought, oh, this really and it's Italian, so it reminded me of Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante. And then I read, I think it's rumoured that he's the husband of Elena Ferrante, and I don't want to find out her identity. So when that all came up in the New York Review of Books, I actually didn't read that article. But I heard that he had written Ties in response to Days of Abandonment, so that makes me want to read it again, or read both of them again together. And this is the new one, Trick, and again translated by Jhumpa Lahiri. So the quality of the writing, I think that takes it to another level. But I don't know what this is about, so maybe I should have a look. It's sharp, succinct storytelling, and that was in Ties as well. It was very, very succinct. He's able to really conjure up a scene in just a short, paragraph. And I think he was also is also a screenwriter, so that probably informs his writing. So this is a drama about ambition, family, and old age. A duel between two men. One, Daniele Malarico, is an illustrator, but he's fading, and the other, Mario, is his grandson, 4-year-old grandson. Okay, so he's been living in a cold northern city for years in solitude, and his daughter asks if he would come to Naples and babysit Mario while she and her husband attend a conference. So he's shut inside his childhood home, which is an apartment in Naples. Okay, I think we're going back into the being shut inside an apartment situation, which he does really well. So again, this should be very compelling. Let me know if you've read it. I'm just distracted at the moment because out of the window there's a car that is like smoking a lot, and that's not good. I don't know what that means. I'm not good with cars, but it's not looking very good. So that's Trick by Domenico Starnone. It's like a short story is unfolding as I speak. So that's what I'm reading this week-ish, I guess. And I'd love to know what you're reading, and if you've read any of those, let me know. And I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now. And there's the beach. It's very, very quiet today. There's no breeze, so you can't hear much from the ocean. But very peaceful.